Hi everyone, it's Jennifer from Fiberflux. Welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, welcome. I'm so glad you're here. Today we're going to be talking about the Granny Stashdown challenge and some summer updates. Before we get started, be sure and hit that subscribe button to get all the latest Fiberflux video updates. It helps the channel, it supports the channel, and I appreciate it so much. So don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you're not already subscribed. So you may be asking yourself, what is a Granny Stashdown challenge? Well, every year in the Fiberflux community, I do a granny square using some scrap yarn. So what I do is collect, and I'm going to turn this so you can see it, but this is a whole bin full of scrap yarn. And so every time I finish a project, before we started doing this as a community, every time I finish a project, I would toss a little bit of yarn in there. So for example, this was left over from something. It's just a small amount of yarn, and I'd throw it in a bin, not really knowing what to do with it. And so eventually I decided to make something. I was gonna just make a blanket, just make like a scrappy blanket out of it. And I started making a granny square, and I just kept adding to it and adding to it and adding to it. And it eventually became this really huge, super thick, fun granny square blanket. So I decided to share it with the Fiberflux community and see if anybody else was interested. And lots of people joined me, and we've been making these for many years. Many years we've been doing the Granny Stashdown challenge every year. And so I have this bin of yarn, and I add to it a little bit each couple times a month, and then we do like a seasonal update. So this is what I have so far. We started in the new year. It's always like kind of kicks off the new year with our Granny Stashdown challenge. And I started just a little bit with you earlier in the year, and then I've been adding on to it. Now it's not huge yet, but there is so much yarn on this thing. It is so thick and heavy. It could actually be probably a rug at this point, or even like a nice little mat for a pet bed or something like that, or a play mat or something along those lines. But it is thick and cozy and so colorful. Now some years, if I had a lot of a certain kind of color, like one year I did all neutrals. This is just anything goes is the rules for this one. But a lot of you share over in, so we book group for crochet alongs, and we have a Ravelry group for crochet alongs, and a lot of you like to share what you're working on with your scrap yarn, and it's so much fun to see what everybody's coming up with, because everybody has different yarn stashes and everybody has different leftovers, so no two are alike, and it's just a really fun project. So what I like to do too is I like to hold several strands. You can see it kind of like feeding into the blanket from this bin, but I like to take, this is actually 4 strands of yarn, and I'm using a P crochet hook, so pretty big crochet hook. And I like to hold 4 strands of yarn and make this like big, thick, cozy blanket, because we run the challenge all through the year. And then at the end of the year, when it's December and you know where I live is cold, you have this big cozy warm blanket or mat or rug or what have you at the end of the year. Now in the past, I usually donate mine at the end of the year. Some of you give them as gifts, some of you keep them and you know use them for different things around the house. So there's all different purposes for them, and it's just a really fun way to use up some yarn that you may otherwise just kind of have laying around. So let's kind of dig around this bin a little bit. I grabbed the bin because it is just so full right now. I've been adding, I got little half balls of yarn, little scraps of yarn, all kinds of little things I've been working on throughout the year. And sometimes I have a little bit more than others, but the rule is to try to use it all up, and you know, any colors, doesn't matter. Sometimes I just grab one, I make it fun and don't even look. So let me scoot this out of the way. But the result is this gigantic, fluffy, warm granny square. Now, if you've never done this, I'm going to put the link down below. So when we kicked off the project in January, I did do a full video tutorial on how to make the granny square stitch by stitch and step by step, if you're not familiar with how to make a granny square. But you can follow along with the tutorial. Now, some people like to depart and do different types of squares, which is always really fun to see. I use 4 strands of yarn. Sometimes people will make one that's a little less lofty than mine, but it's really fun. Everybody gets really creative, and If you haven't joined us yet and you're intrigued, I encourage you to join. It's really fun to kind of collect all those yarn scraps that you have laying around. Okay, let's take a closer look at this blanket because I wanted to show you some things, and then I did get some questions last time I shared an update, and I wanted to talk about that too. So as you can see, there is metallic yarn through here. I held 4 strands throughout. Now, one of the questions I got was when you're holding really thick yarn, like this is that fluffy kind of chenille, and then this is a super bulky yarn. I still held 4 strands throughout. So the blanket does get like really plushy in some areas and not as plushy in other areas, but this for me is an anything goes blanket. So I'm just doing 4 strands no matter what. I'm using a 10mm P crochet hook, so that can handle a good amount of yarn and thickness in my hand and on my hook. So let's spin this around because I have right now, I'm currently working on this part here, and I'm just going to back up so you can see it a little bit better. But I'm currently working. I did have some people ask about working with so many strands of yarn, and all I do is when the reason I chose a granny square long ago was because it's really easy to find if you're holding all this yarn and it's really bulky. It's really easy to find where you need to go next because we're just working into the spaces. So to answer the questions I got about holding multiple strands of yarn, you just hold it as if it's one big strand of yarn, okay? So as you work, you're just gonna work as if it's one big strand of yarn. Now, a little tip though is to go kind of on the slow side because you want to make sure as you hook and draw it through like this, you want to make sure that you're going through all the loops, okay, and that you're not leaving any loops behind, because if you leave a loop behind, it could become unraveled, okay? The other question I got is how to handle all of the ends. So as I work, I just weave in the ends as I go along. So as you can see, there's a few ends kind of sticking out. Those were the ends I wove as I went along. So every so often, every couple of rounds or so, I just grab my scissors and I just look for some ends. There's some more on the back here, but I just look for some and I just give them a snip. Now you can wait till the end to give your ends a snip. But I like to snip them as I go along just because it keeps everything nice and neat. Sometimes when you've been crocheting for a while, honestly, it gives me kind of a break as I'm working. So I just go through and look for some ends. There's some over here and I can just get those snipped and woven in as needed, okay? So the ends, and then finally, the last question I got was somebody asked, how do I switch colors? And the way I like to do it when I'm doing these projects, I'm going to slide this back up here so you can see the top here. But the way that I like to do it is when I'm crocheting along and I've run out of a color. So I grab my scissors because what we're going to do is I'm going to pretend that I've run out of this pink yarn, okay? So I'm just gonna cut it. So once I've run out of yarn, I just grab another scrap yarn. You may recognize this yarn from my Morning Glory shawl that I just released that video not too long ago. But all I do is when I run out of one color, I just tie it right on, okay? Just tie it right on. Again, this is a very casual, anything goes kind of project. And all we're going to do is when we hold our strands, I'm just going to hold those ends also along with the strand, and we're going to just weave that in as we go. So you can just keep going, and I'm just going to kind of crochet this part so you can see. But see, I'm holding all the strands together, and you might have some extras. See how they're popping out now? You might have some extras for a minute, for a stitch or two, just as you kind of get those woven. You see they're kind of popping out. We're going to deal with those in just a minute. And you're just going to keep going. Okay, see, now I have the new yarn incorporated, and I'm still holding my 4 strands, and I can just keep going. So for this project, I kind of get a little bit more finicky with other projects with the ends and things like that. But for this project, we just keep on going. Now, when you see how we wove this in? You can just give it a little bit of a tug, snip it, and then keep going, okay? If you see another end, you can just kind of address it then. And look, I'm almost out of gray now, so I can tie on another color at that point. Okay, so I just wanted to kind of like zoom in and show you on my table just some of the questions I've got about this project, and you can just keep going. So you can, as you can see, you can really use up a lot of yarn. Like I mentioned before, this is pretty heavy and thick and bulky. This would make a really pretty rug with your scrap yarn and or like I said, a play mat or anything like that. So any size yarn, thickness yarn, metallics, all that you can incorporate into this. Now, one more question I got was about care instructions. So that's a great question because we have all different kinds of fibers in this project as well. We have chenille, we have some wool up here is some wool yarn. We have acrylic yarn. We have super bulky like a wool blend here. So all different fibers and multiple different types of care instructions. So what I would recommend if you're using all different scrap yarns and you're having trouble keeping track of all the different, there's probably as many care instructions as there are yarn representing this blanket. So what I would recommend is to just kind of hand wash it and lay it flat to dry. Another thing I like to do when I'm hand washing my handmade items is I have a little fan and I like to just kind of put the fan on my projects as they dry as well. Just a personal preference, not necessary, but it kind of increases the airflow to kind of get it through all those fibers, especially with these really thick projects. You want as much airflow as possible while they're drying. So the best thing is probably to hand wash if you're using a mix of fibers. Now, if you have a whole bin of like acrylic yarn, you can just use the care instructions from your yarn labels too. Those are always a good bet too. But if you're using multiple fibers, like someone had asked, definitely try to hand wash it. So like I mentioned before, hop on over to the Ravelry Crochet Along group and the Facebook Crochet Along group. Both of the links are below. You can hop in there, see what other people are doing. I do other crochet alongs throughout the year, but you can share what you're doing. You can ask questions. The Fiberflux community is the best community, and everybody helps people, and it's just a really fun place to hang out. So both of those groups are really nice. So hop on over there, check it out, and in the meantime, start collecting your yarn scraps, and you can do a Granny Stashdown challenge along, and it's always a lot of fun. So that's it for this video. I'm going to do another update in the fall. I'm going to scoot this over. But I'm going to do another update in the fall, and hopefully it will have grown a little bit bigger by then. I like to add a little bit to it each month, just here and there throughout the year. And it's really amazing using 4 strands of yarn, how much yarn goes into that and how much yarn that you can use up. So I will see you in the next update. I'm going to do one in the fall, and we'll see how big they've gotten. In the meantime, share your work. Use the hashtag FiberfluxCal if you share it on social media, and definitely tag me. The tag is up here pretty much for every platform that I'm on. So share your work, and I'll see you in the fall for the next update. We'll see what this looks like next. Thanks so much for watching, and be sure and click the subscribe button to get all the latest Fiberflux video updates. Thanks again.